Adolf Hitler. Hitler did not die like the conqueror who promised a 1,000-year empire. He died hidden underground, inside a bunker, while the world he had set on fire closed in on him from every direction. By April 1945, Berlin was no longer a capital. It was a trap made of smoke, ruins, and desperate soldiers. The Red Army was entering the city, and Hitler was still underground, moving imaginary armies across maps that no longer meant anything. Above him, children, old men, and exhausted soldiers were defending the impossible. Below them, the man who had built his entire regime on speeches about strength could barely accept that it was over. On April 29th, he married Eva Braun in a strange wedding held inside the collapse. The next day, April 30th, he knew there would be no escape. Mussolini had been captured and displayed by his enemies, and Hitler feared the same fate. He did not want surrender. He did not want a trial. He did not want the world to see him defeated. He entered a private room with Eva Braun. She took poison. Hitler killed himself shortly after. Their bodies were carried outside the bunker, covered with fuel and burned by his own men. There was no imperial farewell, no final victory, only a cornered dictator, a destroyed city, and an empire that, instead of lasting 1,000 years, ended in ashes after 12. Hitler's final image is not conquest, but confinement. Benito Mussolini. Mussolini wanted to look like Caesar. He wanted crowds, Roman columns, and a new Italian empire. But his final days had no marble, no glory, and no parade. They had fear, disguises, and a road leading nowhere. For years, he was the theatrical face of Italian fascism. Balcony speeches, exaggerated gestures, and promises of greatness. But by the end of the Second World War, Italy was broken. The Allies were advancing from the south. Partisans controlled parts of the north. And Germany, his great protector, was collapsing too. Mussolini no longer looked like Il Duce. He looked like a man searching for an exit. In April 1945, he tried to flee toward Switzerland with Clara Petacci. He was disguised among German soldiers, as if history would not recognize him under a coat. But near Lake Como, Italian partisans stopped him. The man who had promised to restore Rome was trapped on an Italian road, with no army, no empire, and no stage. He was executed the next day. His body and Clara's were taken to Milan and displayed in a public square, where the crowd released years of accumulated rage. Mussolini had always understood power as spectacle. He had turned politics into theater, so his death also became a public image. Only this time, he was not controlling the stage. Mussolini's final road ended in humiliation, not empire. Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il did not have a televised death like Saddam, a bloody collapse like Gaddafi, or a burning bunker like Hitler. His death was stranger, silent, closed, and wrapped in propaganda, like almost everything in North Korea. For years, he was presented as an almost supernatural figure, the perfect leader, the perfect strategist, the father of the nation. The regime built impossible stories around him, while the country remained sealed off, militarized, and marked by hunger, surveillance, and fear. In December 2011, Kim Jong-il was reportedly traveling by train when he suffered a heart attack. According to the official version, he died on December 17th. But the news was not announced immediately. For a while, the country continued as if the leader were still alive, while the regime carefully prepared how to turn a death into a ceremony of continuity. When the announcement finally came, North Korean television showed mass mourning. Thousands of people cried in the streets, some perhaps from real grief, others perhaps because in a dictatorship, even crying can become a political obligation. His death did not break the system, it confirmed it. Power passed to his son, Kim Jong-un, and the dynasty continued. Kim Jong-il died inside the regime he had inherited and hardened. Even in death, he remained useful to the propaganda machine. The silent train became a state ceremony. Joseph Stalin. Stalin spent decades making millions of people fear a knock in the night. His ending had a terrible irony. When he collapsed, almost no one dared to enter the room. In March 1953, Stalin was at his dacha near Moscow. He was old, paranoid, and surrounded by subordinates who feared him more than they respected him. He had purged enemies, allies, officers, doctors, peasants, and old revolutionaries. Being close to Stalin was dangerous. Being far away was dangerous too. One night, after meeting members of the Soviet leadership, he withdrew to his rooms. The next day, he did not appear. No one wanted to disturb him. In any normal country, that would have been concern. In Stalin's world, it was administrative terror. What if he was sleeping? What if he was angry? What if entering without permission was a death sentence? When they finally found him, he was on the floor, unable to speak, probably after suffering a stroke. The doctors arrived late, and even treating him was politically dangerous. Stalin had built a system where even saving his life could be terrifying. He died on March 5, 1953. He was not executed. He was not put on trial. But his final scene summarized his regime better than any speech. a body lying on the floor, and everyone around him calculating whether helping him might destroy them. The silent train became a state ceremony. Rafael Trujillo. Rafael Trujillo ruled the Dominican Republic as if the country were his private estate with a flag. He renamed cities, filled the streets with his portraits, and built a regime where flattery was not politeness. It was survival. For more than 30 years, he mixed the army, secret police, propaganda, and violence. His name was everywhere. The capital itself was renamed Ciudad Trujillo. But that is the trap of dictators. When you force everyone to smile at you, you stop knowing who is waiting for a chance. On May 30th, 1961, Trujillo was traveling by car on a road near Santo Domingo. He was not protected like an untouchable emperor. He was following a route his enemies knew. A group of Dominican conspirators prepared an ambush after years of repression, fear, and humiliation. The car was attacked. Trujillo tried to resist, but he was shot several times and died there. He did not fall in a great battle. He did not fall before a foreign invasion. He fell on a road in his own country, killed by men who had lived under his shadow. His death did not bring clean freedom or instant order. Persecution, confusion, and a struggle for power followed. But the symbol was brutal. A man who had forced an entire country to say his name was stopped by gunfire in the dark. The road ended the name that had covered the country. Nicolae Ceausescu. Ceausescu discovered his ending live in front of a crowd that was no longer behaving correctly. That was the exact moment he understood that fear had broken. For decades, he ruled Romania through personality cult, surveillance, poverty, and propaganda. He and his wife Elena lived inside a bubble of power while the country suffered shortages, cold, and repression. Television showed happy factories, applause, and obedient crowds. But reality was waiting for its moment. In December 1989, protests began in Timișoara and spread. Ceausescu tried to do what he had always done: step onto a balcony, speak to the crowd, and demand obedience. But this time, people started shouting against him. In the footage, you can see his face change. First surprise, then confusion, then fear. It was like watching a dictatorship lose the script. He and Elena fled by helicopter, but it was already too late. They were captured, put through a quick and chaotic trial, and accused of crimes against the people. On December 25, 1989, they were executed. His death was violent and later broadcast as proof that the regime was over. Ceausescu had built a fake reality where everyone loved him. His final moment came when the real one appeared in the square and started shouting back. Fear had broken in public. The date became Christmas Day, 1989. Pol Pot. Pol Pot had one of the most frustrating endings in modern history. He did not die before an international court. He did not hear a sentence equal to the horror he had directed. He died old, weakened, and almost hidden, as if history had arrived too late. Between 1975 and 1979, the Khmer Rouge turned Cambodia into a nightmare. Cities were emptied, families were separated, people were forced into labor, hunger spread, executions followed, and the regime became obsessed with creating a new society from zero. Pol Pot did not simply want to rule a country. He wanted to erase the old one. When Vietnam invaded Cambodia in 1979, the regime fell, but Pol Pot did not disappear. He escaped into the jungle and remained involved in guerrilla warfare for years. That is the uncomfortable part. After everything, he survived. He was not captured immediately. He was not judged in the moment. By the 1990s, even inside his own movement, his power began to rot. In 1997, he was subjected to a kind of internal trial by his own followers and placed under house arrest. He was no longer the great revolutionary leader. He was an old man isolated by the remains of his own machine. He died on April 15, 1998, officially of natural causes, probably heart failure. His ending had no cinematic justice. Sometimes history does not punish with precision. Sometimes it only leaves a name as a synonym for horror. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein spent years appearing among palaces, parades, and giant portraits. But when they found him, he was not in a palace. He was hiding in a hole. For decades, he ruled Iraq through personal cult, repression, war, and fear. He survived conflicts, conspiracies, and defeats. He invaded Iran. He invaded Kuwait. He confronted the United States. For a long time, he seemed to remain at the center of the board, like a dictator who always found a way out. But in 2003, the invasion of Iraq destroyed his regime in a matter of weeks. Baghdad fell. Statues were pulled down. Palaces were occupied. Saddam disappeared. And for months, he became a shadow hunted by soldiers, informants, and intelligence services. On December 13, 2003, he was captured near Tikrit. He was hiding in a small underground shelter, what the press called a spider hole. The image was devastating to his myth. The man from the heroic portraits appeared disheveled, exhausted, and subjected to a medical examination in front of cameras. Then came the trial. Saddam tried to use it as a political stage, but the power was no longer there. He was sentenced to death and executed on December 30th, 2006. His ending did not heal Iraq's wounds, but it destroyed the image he had built of himself. He was not invincible. He had only taken a long time to fall. Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi ruled Libya for more than 4 decades and built an image that was impossible to ignore. Strange uniforms, endless speeches, Bedouin tents, bodyguards, theater, and absolute power. He seemed less like a normal politician and more like a character designed to never look normal. But in 2011, during the Arab Spring, that image began to crack. Protests became rebellion. Rebellion became civil war. And the leader who had promised to crush his enemies began losing cities, allies, and control. Tripoli fell. The regime collapsed. Gaddafi fled towards Sirte, his hometown, looking for one last place to resist. On October 20th, 2011, a convoy carrying him was attacked while trying to escape. Afterward, Gaddafi was captured by rebel fighters. Images of his final moments traveled around the world. They were chaotic, violent, and uncomfortable. The man who had dominated Libya for 42 years no longer controlled anything. Not the camera, not the crowd, and not his own ending. He died shortly after being captured, amid violence and confusion. His death did not bring automatic stability. Libya entered years of fragmentation and political conflict. That is the bitter detail. Killing a dictator does not mean building a country. Gaddafi had tried to become the permanent center of Libya. His final moments were the opposite, a leader dragged away by the collapse of a state he had built around himself. Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong did not die fleeing, hiding, or facing a firing squad. He died in power, and in a way that makes his ending even colder. For decades, he was the absolute face of the People's Republic of China. Revolutionary, leader, symbol, and figure of worship. His portrait looked down from squares, walls, and little red books. Millions learned to repeat his words, as if they were instructions for understanding reality. But behind the myth were devastating campaigns, purges, famine, political violence, and a society forced to revolve around one man. In his final years, Mao became increasingly weak. His health deteriorated. He suffered neurological and heart problems, and he could barely speak clearly. But even weakened, he remained the center of the system. His body was failing, but his shadow still organized Chinese politics. He died on September 9th, 1976, after several heart attacks and years of physical decline. There was no theatrical fall, no trial, no crowd tearing him down. There was official mourning, propaganda, ceremonies, and a transition watched carefully by the state. Soon after, the Gang of Four was arrested, and China began moving away from some of the most radical policies of Maoism. Mao died the way many dictators hope to die: in bed, officially worshipped, and without answering before a court. But history does not end at the funeral. 10 dictators, 10 different endings for the same illusion, the belief that power can last forever. Hitler died underground while his empire burned above him. Mussolini tried to flee in disguise and became a public image of humiliation. Kim Jong-il died inside a dynasty that turned even grief into propaganda. Stalin collapsed in a room where everyone was too afraid to help him. Trujillo was ambushed on a road in the country he had treated like private property. Ceausescu discovered live that the crowd no longer obeyed him. Pol Pot died without the full justice his victims deserved. Saddam was found hiding underground, far from his palaces. Gaddafi died in the chaos of the rebellion that destroyed his regime. And Mao died in power, proving that not every ending is punishment. Some died violently, others died old, some were judged, others escaped the courts, but all of them left the same warning. Fear can hold a regime together for years, even decades, but it cannot stop the final day. And when that day arrives, the statue, the uniform, the portrait, and the title stop mattering. Only one much simpler question remains: what is left of the man when power can no longer protect him?